Hello there, and welcome to your virtual Space Hero community. It is a tremendous pleasure to have you here this Friday afternoon because we're going to tackle a super important topic of the virtual space. And we're not having a new guest. We are having somebody that I would say is already somebody I love to invite almost every month on my show because she's just amazing. And we have some things in common, as you remember, because my guest is also a hero fan. And with that, I'm not going to wait longer, but already stream her, put her, invite her on the stage here, on the virtual Space Hero stage here. And it is again Kassy LaBorie connecting from the US. Hi there.
Hello, Barbara. Thanks for having me back.
Thanks a lot for following on my invitation. It's really fantastic to have you here with us, Kassy. So I announced, or I said that we have something in common because you also like heroes, right?
Yes.
So my brand, our company is called Virtual Space Hero, and Kassy is running a tremendous blog with virtual training hero tips. And so we also have more things in common that we're not going to talk about now here on this show, but you definitely should check out kassyconsulting.com. And if you go to the blog, you find the virtual training hero tips there.
That's right.
Kassy, you had a tough week. You were presenting at different conferences. There is a trainers conference going on, isn't it? Or now in
Yes.
January.
Yes, it wasn't a tough week. It was a wonderful week. Oh my gosh. It's ATD's Tech Knowledge that happens once a year at this year. And it's always one of my most favorite audiences because, well, it's all focused on learning technologies. And so they're all the technical ones. And so I really like that. And I had a hands-on learning lab that went for 2 hours. And so we were in breakout after breakout after breakout, which I know is what you and I are here to talk about today. So it's very, very timely.
That is fantastic. It sounds super exciting. And well, I've been following you for quite some time, and I'm really always the LinkedIn lives with you and also with my other guests are super learning opportunities for me. And today, and for my audience. So, of course, today we're going to talk about how to use breakout rooms. And I'm really very much looking forward to that because many of us have experimented with breakout rooms. And I'm sure that today we're going to learn a lot from you and get new ideas and also from you out there, virtual Space Hero community. So I do know that there are people joining from 3 different platforms. We are on LinkedIn, we are on YouTube, and we are on Facebook. So let us know where you are connecting from, and also maybe what is your favorite breakout room activity? How do you use them? Or do you have a challenge that you want us to discuss? Super happy. So definitely use the chat and let us know your questions in the comment section, please. But Kassy, I'd love to start with one question that is about breakout rooms in general. So you have been working with breakout rooms for how many years already?
Well, I've been working in virtual training for 2 decades, and so breakout rooms have always been a part of every training that I've ever delivered. Though when I do think about when I first began, we actually didn't have breakout room functionality. And so I remember when I worked at WebEx, we were very excited when they launched WebEx Training Center so that we could have the option for the actual feature to put people into small groups. So I've been doing it, though, for as long as the feature has been available.
And if you think about breakout rooms in general, is there something that we should consider before, during, and maybe after using breakout rooms? Are there some general rules that you would like to put on the table here? Something that is really important?
Well, for me, it isn't about using breakout rooms. It's about objectives. What are we trying to do? And breakout rooms are one strategy for getting to that objective. And so once you've outlined that your objective, decides this should be a small group activity, which is what a breakout room feature or functionality will allow for you to do in the online environment. Once you've decided the objective will be best completed in a breakout room, in a small group, then I do think there are some things you want to be aware of so that you can be successful both before, during, and after. And I think probably the biggest thing is the instructions. You need to be very clear with yourself on what are you doing. And excuse me, I always like to have the instructions be 2 parts. You have the instructions of what the people are doing. What is the activity and what's the point of working together in a small group? And I always outline those separately from the technical instructions of how they get into that room in whatever platform we might be using. And so I really lean on my producer to describe those instructions so that not only are they getting two separate sets of instructions, but they're also from two different people. And that can help them take that in more clearly. But the
Mm-hmm.
instructions is such a big deal. And here's another thing, I always write them down for them because all of my training programs include participant materials. And so I always tell everybody, turn to page 5 and you'll see on page 5 what you're doing once you're in your small group. And on page 6 are the technical instructions on how to make that happen.
Fantastic. I also believe, and I like what you're saying. So we're also coming back to the role of the producer, right? So if we are in a training, the producer, so we have the main facilitator and a co-host or a producer who is supporting with the technical instructions. I really like that. And I think that's somehow a role that got a little bit lost last year, because at least that's my feeling, because so many trainers started to work virtually and nobody factored in the producers, because we just transformed a little bit our in-presence trainings to the virtual space. We didn't think about the producer, and that's what the producer role, in my perception at least, got a little bit lost. But I also know that you have a fantastic book about the producer's role, right?
Yeah, it's right there on my shelf, actually. This is my latest book, which was just published 1 month ago on producing virtual training, meetings, and webinars. And in fact, it is on the role of the producer and all the production tasks that go into making a successful event. Even what you're doing here today, you're not doing it alone. You have a lot of people around you helping you. And in this moment of go live, you even have people behind the scenes helping you that people don't maybe necessarily realize about. But I think, yeah, in this last year, to your point, I think that it's my experience that the producer role did not get lost. In fact, it is my experience that people paid attention to it all of a sudden because they then realized, oh, wait, this is a lot more than I realized, and I now need help. And it's a lot to do. I mean, I think in person, we have so many people helping us that we've just taken for granted for a long time. And we don't realize that until all of a sudden you are alone and you're using all this technology and trying to connect with people. And, really it's way too much for one person to do. I'm not trying to say, though, that one person can't do it, because certainly there are many people out there who do it, but it's hard. And what's happening is your participants and your ability to connect with people is what is suffering. Your ability to truly engage, because you're trying to do too much.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I like what you were saying, that the producer gives the technical input, whether it is in the chat or whether it is through your instruction book or design book, what you hand out, your handouts, and that you're giving sort of the content instructions. And so we have like this bit of piece that is super important for a breakout room, that we need to have a very precise and clear description before we send the people into the breakout rooms. And for example, in my case, I don't work with very little. I don't have like handouts or booklets beforehand, but I use extensively the chat. And so that's also a possibility on where to put all that information, right?
I don't know. I would find that overwhelming personally, but
Really?
yes, that's too much. I send handouts ahead of time, and then I also have visuals on the screen that would, like on my PowerPoint slides or whatever visuals I'm sharing, that would have instructions. But the thing is, in most of the platforms I've worked in, when you go into the breakout, it doesn't always carry over the main chat. And so then they would lose those instructions. And so for me, I'm using handouts and I'm having people download those ahead of time, and then they can refer to them.
Yeah, I must say I'm happy that Zoom is now recovering or maintaining the chat from the main room. That's why it's working pretty well.
I see, yes.
Fantastic. But preparation from a content input perspective and also from a technical perspective, and of course, well prepared, you're sending it out beforehand. Fantastic.
Yes.
When people are during the breakout session, not even talking about what they're doing, but what do you need to consider as a producer or facilitator while they are in a small breakout session, small group work?
I think the biggest thing is making sure everyone connected. and that they're okay and that they're clear on what they're then doing. And then I think too, to give them time. A lot of times we don't prepare enough time for people to do the work that we want them to do. And so make sure you give them enough time in the breakouts. And then when they come back, at what level do you need to debrief what they did? Like, do we need to have everyone talk about what they did, or is it actually not necessary? And where I have learned this is by being a participant to other sessions and being in breakouts myself. So I could feel what it feels like as an attendee. How much time did I really need? Did I really need to talk about it again with everybody? Because it can get, I think we trainers, facilitators, I think we think it is all about us. And it's not. It's about them and their experience. And so I'm always trying to focus on make sure that it's clear that they have enough time to do what they need to do, and that whatever we do when we come back is still relevant to what they need to learn and ultimately what they need to apply in their jobs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that is really super important that we experience and experiment with our feelings when we are in breakout rooms to really understand what are we putting our participants through, right? Very good point. If I think about the breakouts that I'm using in terms of time, of course, always coming back to what are the objectives of the exercise, the activity, would you say that there is it's probably difficult to say because it depends on the objectives. But if you think about your trainings, would you say that you have like an average time of a breakout?
It depends on the objectives, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is I don't generally do a breakout if it's going to be less than 5 minutes. I do want it to be at least 5 minutes, because otherwise, why spend the time dealing with it? Because otherwise, I'll do a private chat or we'll do a group discussion. So at least 5. And then I've done them where they're like 20, 30 minutes. I've even done some that are longer. And I've done breakouts where people go alone. They break
Mm-hmm.
out by themselves to go work on software. And I give them a big assignment. And that way, it gives me plenty of time to go around to their desk and see how they're doing. So there's just lots of different ways to use the breakout functionality, and the objective does drive the timing. But if I were to say, like, given what I teach, I teach people how to be virtual trainers. I have certificate programming for that. So they're trainers, they're designers, and they're producers. That's what I mostly work in. And so for me, on average, when people are in breakout rooms, it's 10 minutes. And I tend to do groups of 3, not more than 5. 3 is my favorite.
Oh, fantastic. That was one of my next questions indeed, because let me just finish up with the first one. So
Mhm.
we were talking about planning before, during, and after. So we were talking also, you said like how much debrief do we need? So that's also something important we need to consider when we design a breakout room activity.
Yeah.
Do we need to debrief it? Does everybody need to speak up? Should we ask for a moderator, somebody who takes notes before we send them into breakout? Is there something else you would consider
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, for sure. So I've done a lot of different things and I try different things all the time. And so, in regards to do I need a moderator, I haven't, in the training that I do, I have not found that I need to assign someone to be a person who takes notes. But I have found that it's quite effective to assign a leader and to just say, Barbara, you're the leader of your group and you start. I find that things move more quickly if they just know who should start. There's something about, and if we all think about it, in person, it's the same thing. You're in a class and you're like, who should be the leader? And you waste all this time wondering who the leader should be. And online, we just don't have time to waste. So I do tend to assign a leader, in most situations, not in all. And one thing I'll say about that too is that, Barbara, if I were to assign you as the leader, I would also say, Barbara, you are the leader of your group. I give you full power to delegate your role to someone else should you choose. And so they have that choice. And, depending on the activity, it might be that you need someone to take notes. Like one real classic activity that I do is a role play where I put them in triads in teams of 3, and they're going to take turns, one person being a subject matter expert, one person being the instructional designer, and the third person being the observer. And that observer takes the notes. And then I send them, I put them in there for 15 minutes. Each person plays each role 5 minutes. And so I send the broadcast message saying switch roles, switch roles, switch roles. And each person is a note taker at one point. So it does depend on what the activity is, on what you're going to do there. But that's my note on getting them in there and deciding. And then I do have a note about debrief, but I wanted to pause for just a moment if you're ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Super good. Fantastic. So the debrief depends, of course, as well on how many participants we have, if it makes sense, sometimes longer, sometimes maybe not as long. Fantastic. So you
Yeah, the
mentioned
debriefing. I want
already,
to tell you about that. I'm sorry to cut you off,
go
but
ahead.
yeah,
No,
like
no, go ahead.
this week at conference, I had like over 50 people, and we did 4 breakouts. So it was one after the other. And I didn't debrief from every single group because you can imagine we had 20 breakout rooms. And
Of
so
course.
am I going to hear from 20 different representatives, or do we want to still have the class? And so think about yourself when you're at a conference in person and you're in a big conference room with hundreds of people and there's one trainer up at the front and they have you work at your table and you do something with your group and then they call time and then they ask for a few volunteers in the room. How did your group do? Did they go to every single table in person? They don't. And so that's why I started thinking about we don't need to do it online either. Even though as a trainer, I may feel like I should let everyone tell me what happened. Reality is they had it happen and they let it work for them. And I think that desire for me to have them tell me what happened was more about me than about them. And so I've let that go and I let a few people volunteer. We have a bit of a conversation. Now, if I'm in a smaller group where I'm doing like my train the trainer certificate, for example, I've got 16 people. The debriefs are different. I'm having them debrief and because when they went in the breakout, they were building some skill and I want them to come back and demonstrate that skill together now. And so, of course, each team has time to go. So again, it always goes back to the objective and what's really necessary. But I think you really truly have to evaluate that and really truly ask yourself, is this about me or is this actually
It's
about
about the
them? Yeah.
Very, very good point. We're always coming back to the objective. It's not only when we design a training course or any kind of course or a training day, but it's also when we think about the breakout sessions, of course. So let us also know you out there, because I know there are other trainers listening, and I see we have people joining in from LinkedIn. Sunita Nihani, hi there. Thanks for joining us. I know she's a trainer colleague based in India. We have also Gradiola joining, and we already are getting questions in there. So let us also know how do you create interaction with breakout rooms. We are super interested in that as well. So there is one question, and this is probably a very, very big one. So Thomas is asking, Kassy LaBorie, how would you use breakout rooms for a web design online course with live lessons every week? So
I
dear
would
God, big
probably use it.
question.
I'd probably use it all the time. And actually, Tomas, it would be helpful to see some of the objectives, first, before I give you exact answers. But it seems to me people are designing an online course, they're going to be doing a lot of designs. And so give them like what I do, I actually teach an instructional design course for virtual instructor-led training. And what I do is I provide examples. So I say, listen, here's some examples of what I do. And we go through them and then I go, now you go try it. And I've given them a process to follow so that they have guidelines. And then I put them in the breakout and let them try together with someone else. And then they come back and they say, this is what we think. And then the group hears from that and we all give each other feedback. And then in addition to that, Tomas, like an outside breakout room, not while we're together live, is I'm giving them assignments to make things. And then they bring to the live class what they've made. And I let people show their work and we give each other feedback. And so they work in breakouts constantly, trying out the designs after they see each other's examples. So there's so many ways you could do that. And it's such a fun class actually too.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. And I think maybe let's start now on can you use breakout rooms differently? Because you already mentioned that. You can use them for group activities, but you can also use them for individual activities. So
Yes.
maybe could you explore a little bit further on that, Kassy?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the most classic example is letting people work in small groups on something you give them to do. But a very sort of overlooked example is to let people go into a breakout room alone. And this is for people, primarily, I have found, this is for people who teach software, more technical training. And so you can imagine you know how it is. You're going to open up your computer, share your screen, and you're teaching people how to use Articulate, and you walk through all of it and everyone's asleep. And so what I like to do is walk through that demo, get their questions, make it as interactive as possible, and then put everybody into their own breakout room for at least a solid half an hour. And then I have assignments for them that are provided in the materials, and then they're going to work through those projects independently. And then what that lets me do is me and my course assistants or my producers, they can go around to each breakout room and help people one-on-one and see the work that they're doing. And so that's a good one. And I have a third example for you too. Recently, with Zoom's new feature of letting people choose their own breakout room, what we've been doing is, imagine this, a lot of universities have just started their next term. And obviously back in the end of the summer, early fall, we started university and it was online. And so how do you meet the professors? And so what we did is we put each professor in a breakout room and we named it that professor's name. And we let people choose which breakout they were going to go in. And we just sent time alerts. It's been 5 minutes. Go visit the next prof. And so that was just another creative way to do a networking kind of thing, where you let people go around and talk, in this case, with each other. And so just different things you can do. Yeah, there's
Sounds
more.
fantastic. How do you make sure that there are not like 2 or 3 students going to the same professor then if you have the self-select breakout room function in Zoom?
That happens in person. I don't need to make sure of that. People can manage themselves, you know?
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
if
in person you would have like 3 people at the door, and so they can sort of sort it out. How would you? And so you just let them in, they overlap, and then they choose again to go to another room, maybe.
yeah, they can see. I mean, you can see when you open up the panel who's already in there, and if you notice that a room's too full, then you go to another one. It's the same thing as it is in person. I appreciate that about the new Zoom feature, that they've shown us that and let people see it. But I things, I don't control people. When I'm online, I do not control people. It's not my job. What my job is to give you opportunities to want to do things and to try things and to be clear in the directions. But it's not my job to make you do it.
Fantastic, absolutely. And I think also the individual work assignment in breakout room is something pretty overlooked, honestly, as you were saying, because many people are not using it. And I remember a post from Shilpa from the Learning Gym. She's going to be on my show in like 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And Shilpa also discussed, what are you using them for? And for example, in academia, as a researcher or professor, I also use the individual breakout rooms, or assigning one person per breakout room, if I'm talking about research questions. And
Yeah.
then each student goes into a breakout room, and then I visit them, or they come back or whatever, and they work on their own research questions after having heard from me how to formulate a proper research question. And
Uh,
that's really nice, because they sort of get very concentrated also if they are alone in a room.
yes, it's true. And then that gives you that one-on-one time. And this is an example where classes probably go longer. You can be online in a class longer if people are more busy like that, and especially if they're more busy individually like that.
Absolutely. Let me pick up on one more question here from Gradiola that is floating in. How do you make sure everyone feels included, or how do you choose who debriefs? So we are coming back a little bit to the debrief of the
Yeah.
breakout rooms. What is your comment on that, Kassy?
That's a big question that begins from the first moment that we connect. When Gradiola, I'm not doing anything different online than I would do in person. And so when we are online, I'm noticing everybody. I make sure that I can see the entire participant list. I don't hide it. I get everyone to come on camera as much as they are comfortable doing. And I'm using people's names. And learning how to pronounce their names and recognizing and seeing everyone. So this feeling of being included begins from the first moment of contact for me, and it continues throughout the program. And when they go into a breakout room, things aren't different. They already know that they've been seen, and they already know that they have options to speak, to chat, to annotate, to communicate in all the different ways. And in terms of choosing who to debrief, it does depend on the group. I'll usually lean back on that leader that I've assigned, and I'll say, "Are you going to do the debrief, or did you assign someone to do the debrief, Barbara?" Like
Mhm.
that. Or, when I teach my trainer programs and my designer programs, I'm with people for weeks. And so we get to know each other. And, by the time you're in a couple of times, people, I just go, "Who's up?" And they go, "I'll do it." So all of those things happen naturally when you've created a comfortable learning environment, and you're seeing people and you're recognizing them. I think that's one of the biggest things we can do as um, virtual people, if you will, not only trainers and presenters, but make sure you see people, that you're using their names and recognizing the contributions that they're making in the chat and the assignments, on the conversations. And you're
Mm.
welcome, Tomas, by the way. I see your chat.
Thanks a lot. I was about saying, Thomas is saying, thanks a lot for the insight, Kassy. Thanks a lot, Thomas. And thanks a lot for answering Gradiola's question, Kassy. We have another question here that's relating to a different platform now. So Sunita is asking, I mostly need to use Microsoft Teams because of my clients' constraints. Is it practical to try a World Cafe with MS Teams breakout rooms? Kassy, what do you think?
Sunita, I am waiting for Microsoft Teams to be a product that I love using. I am not yet there. I have not used the breakout rooms yet because I don't work at a company. I work as an outside consultant. And so, as you know, Microsoft Teams is always locked down and doesn't let me do things. And so, when I'm working with my clients, I actually have them use other platforms because MS Teams is, we're waiting for it to be better. But I always try everything. I've heard that there's the breakout rooms, and I want them to work, and I want them to work for you. And I say, yes, you should go for it. I don't like for the tool to stop me from what I know participants need to do. And so I keep pushing it and keep making it happen, using the tools that are available, or I get new tools that will allow me to do that. Because ultimately, what's important is the learning, and I don't want the technology to tell me what I can and cannot do.
Absolutely. And maybe just to add a few comments on Microsoft Teams, also Sunita, for you, we have on the barbaracv.com/blog, you find a blog post about how to organize a virtual World Cafe. And I wrote that with Joshua Davis together. It's not focused on MS Teams, but at the end, the breakout rooms in Teams function or work very similar to how Zoom works. So you can go through that blog post and get a few ideas maybe from there. And we're also mentioning other tools that you might be using, but well, you're tied up to MS Teams. But I'm sure you're getting some ideas there, even though they don't have the self-select function. By moving a person and using a lot of broadcasting messages, you can find the workaround.
Yeah, it is only WebEx and Zoom that has self-select, right? The
Yeah,
even Adobe Connect doesn't have that yet, I don't think. And
I don't know.
yeah, I don't think it does. And WebEx has had it always, but people didn't know it was there. It's
Oh,
interesting.
wow.
Yeah.
Nice, nice,
Nobody really
nice, nice.
uses it. But yeah, you're right. What you do, you just move people around themselves. Like, instead of them choosing, you move them around and say it's time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's time. Like the moderator, I started by, that was crazy. When I started trying to do that, I started moving the participants so that the World Cafe host stayed at the table. That was, of course, a crazy thing, moving so many people for one
Yeah.
thing. And then I figured, oh, I just moved the moderators. And then we know that you can just make the co-host trick. And as we did it in Zoom, also use a co-host who can then move forward. You don't even have to do that. But
Oh, that's
Sunita, coming
nice.
back to Microsoft Teams, I would definitely look into the blog article, barbaracv.com/blog. Joshua was writing a really nice one, a few ideas there for you. Kassy, we talked about how to prep before, during, and after breakout room, how to use it for individual and group work. And now we're getting into the ways of, give us a few examples on how you are using the breakout room. breakout rooms in general, a few inspirational ideas for us. I'd love that. And yeah, I see also here a small note from Sunita already. Thanks a lot, Kassy Barbara. That's a great way to think about it. And oh yeah, she wrote read the blog article.
Wonderful.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, I love to give people, I have a list here of different breakout activities that I recently have done. One of my first ones is what I like to call the concept analysis. And so I give people a list of, in this case, a list of quotes on a certain topic. And then they go and read those quotes, and then they analyze that with the concepts that are being shared. And then they come back and decide what they came up with and how it might apply in the work that they are doing. And so I give them things to think about on a specific concept. And the point, of course, would be because they're trying to figure out what they then should do in their own work environment. And so that one's real powerful and works nicely. The next one would be a reflection. Give people an opportunity to think about what we've learned and where they might apply that. And so a classic example for me is I've gone through teaching people a whole bunch of stuff, all these things that are the world according to Kassy. And then what I do is I give them a list of sort of like the top 10 tips. And then I go read the top 10 tips, which ones are are resonating with you and how might you use it? And then they do that. And then, it's really interesting. That's an example of the debrief isn't always necessary. When they come back, I ask people anything that you really want to talk about, and they've already really talked about it in their groups. So they don't necessarily need to re-talk about it. Collaboration is an obvious one where I have people working together on that design. For example, back to Tomas's question, giving them an idea and then saying, go build it out, and then come back and share what you've come up with. You heard me mention role play, which is another big one where I give people assignments to role play through different scenarios. Another one is the independent.
What is their experience? Let me ask you a question. What is your experience with role plays? I'm very hesitant, but that's probably because I'm hesitant with role plays. How do they work out for you? Of course, if I'm as a trainer, I don't like role plays that much. It's difficult for me to facilitate them. But what is your experience with role plays?
Oh, well, it's been wonderful for me. It's in my instructional design certificate where I think I mentioned earlier, I have them in teams of 3.
Exactly.
And this is kind of towards the end of the program where I know one of the objectives of the course is how are you going to convince subject matter experts that their class will work in a virtual environment? And that's what they've been learning. They've been learning how we're going to make classes work in the virtual environment. And so I know that a common conversation for them is going to be working with an expert and saying, it's going to be okay. We're going to make this work. And so I've set up a role play where they're going through just that. And they play that. I go, you're the subject matter expert of what? And actually, it's part of my icebreaker, Barbara. The icebreaker in the beginning is I go, what are you an expert at? And, I tell him, I go, I collect vintage things. You can see my collection of 60s vases behind me, right? And so I'm an expert on 60s vintage glassware, and then when it comes time later on in the breakout, they've all shared as an icebreaker what they are an expert at. And I said, that's the thing that you're going to be teaching online. So play that role, expert. And so I would be the person who I'm an expert in vintage Viking glass. And you're going to be the instructional designer who's going to convince me that that can be taught online in an interactive way. And so we go through that, and they've got, I've given them processes to follow, and they go through talking and actually having those conversations on, some people say, like you probably would say, I am an expert at dancing. And then, we'd be like, can we learn dancing online? And I do tell the person who is the subject matter expert to be against it. Play the role that you do not believe that it will work. And they go through it. And actually, you know what? It's going really well. I think the key to role play is to make sure that it's not, for lack of a better word, dumb. It needs to be real. And they need to have some freedom within that so that it's actually applicable. Maybe fake is a better word, fake. Make it not fake.
Fantastic. So we went through 4 already, dear God.
I know.
What
The
else do you
fifth
have
one
for
is
us?
independent work, which we've already discussed.
Yeah.
And then I've got one more. I have lots. There are so many, but you can tell breakouts are my favorite. The last one is coaching. And so when you want to just go one-on-one with people, or maybe even in two or three people, just a small group, you can break away from the main group to do some independent coaching. And where this comes into play for me is I do in my trainer certificates, we're doing teachbacks. And so we're doing teachbacks in front of a large group, but then we go into a breakout to do some one-on-one coaching of the sensitive things. Because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
people don't want to be coached in front of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Mm-hmm.
private thing. And so we go into, and when the other people are waiting, we just give them a break, and then the class goes on for quite a while. But it's just an interesting and different way to use the breakout room features. There's so many things. I actually think it's endless, and that really you can't go wrong.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. So we have 6 different ways and with a lot of examples on how to use the breakout rooms here. Thanks so much, Kassy. And let me pick up on one question that we have here from Gradiola, who is asking, there are introverts and extroverts and no moderators. So do you have any tips for the breakout rooms to leave space for all to express themselves? Or do the groups only self-regulate?
We pay attention. This is one of the places where I have my producer paying attention, to the varying levels of demonstrated introversion and extroversion, which I'm not a big believer in. There are only two types of people. I don't believe that. And so I think people demonstrate different things at different times. And so I'm having my producer help mix it up with those that are really talkative and those that are less talkative, so that they're not all in one group together. And then I'm trying to be very clear with all of the things I've already discussed today on instructions, and so that everybody has an equal part. Um, but I think
Mm-hmm.
you just need to pay attention to people and make sure that you're helping people. I think for me, that's the biggest thing that I do, is really just try to make sure that my groups are at sizes where I can see them well enough. Because if you're teaching these groups of hundreds of people, you're not going to be able to provide for the needs of the individual. And so if it is necessary for you to do something like Gladiola has just asked, where it's my job to make sure every single person is included, I'm bringing it down to much smaller groups so I can get to know you and see what your needs are. And then I can align you with the proper cohort to work with, that'll be
Mm-hmm.
comfortable for you and where you can be your best.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And let me ask you a question. So, how do you do that in the virtual space? If we think about, for example, having a big training room or classroom or whatever, and you have the groups sitting around, you sort of see, you have an overlook about the groups, how much they're interacting, if they're in the same room, of course. You see a little bit how much they're talking, other people who are not talking at all. How do you do that then in the virtual space? Do you visit frequently / regularly or not at all at the breakout rooms, or is the producer doing that?
I mean, that's a big training. That's different. That's like a conference, and so that's a lot of people. And even if I were in person, even though I can physically see you, your nonverbal communication is an indicator, but it does not tell everything. It can tell some things, but I just do my best to try to pay attention within the setting. And I do have the producer help, and I'm watching how many chats are coming through. I'm watching who's responding to polls. I'm watching how much you're chatting, how much you're talking, how much you're annotating. I'm trying to pay attention to all of those things, and I very much lean on my producer to help with those things as well. And just doing the best I can to pay attention to people. And the more that I am required to pay attention to people, the smaller the group needs to be. And so if it is a larger group, I cannot pay attention at a very deep level because I'm only one
Mm,
person. And so
mhm,
if my client's expectation is that I would be paying attention at the level you just described, I wouldn't be teaching hundreds of people.
And if you, for example, have a training of, let's assume, 12 people, and you split them up into 3 breakout rooms of 4 people, how
Yeah.
do you know who is talking? So do you visit the breakout rooms, or what would be the indicator to understand if they're the introverts and the extroverts, or all the people are sort of interacting in the breakout rooms? You go in
Well,
there.
I mean, first off, is it my job to make sure that every single person is interacting? I don't believe it is.
Mhm.
Let me go back to that, okay? I don't believe it is because everyone learns differently and everyone does what they need to do differently. I'm providing opportunities, I'm giving assignments, and I'm making sure that I call on people equally. Yes, I'll go visit the rooms if the objective requires that I don't disrupt them if I visit. But each person has their own way of being and they have their, like when I go through my program, you're going to complete the certificate and here's what you do to complete the certificate. And some days maybe you have a cold and you're not going to talk as much. Am I going to be like, you're not talking? No, I'm going to let you be you. If you're completing the assignments and you're doing what you need to do and it's working out for you, then that's going to be okay. Because I just think people are different at all times. And I need to make myself available so that people know they can come to me and I want to offer the help and want to be clear in the assignments. But I'm not a school teacher of little ones. It's not how it works.
That's a very, very good point. Thanks so much. So
Mhm.
we're coming back a lot to self-directed learning and the own responsibility in the learning process overall.
Mhm.
Thanks a lot, Kassy. I'm going to pick up. We're already at the end. So let me pick up on the last question
I see
Gudrun
it.
is asking here in the chat. Do you use additional platforms while using breakout rooms like Miro or Mural for collaboration work?
Gurun,
What
thank
do
you
you
for that
think on that?
question. I am a big fan of simplicity. And so it is my preference to keep things as simple and clear as possible so that we can focus on the learning. If the technology supports the learning, I'm open to using it. But for example, when I'm working in Zoom, I haven't found that I've needed Miro or Mural. I have a whiteboard in Zoom and we have a chat and we have annotation and it works just fine. If what we were working on would be done better in another tool, then I will use it. But again, I'm a big fan of less logins, less screens, more thinking, more getting to what we need to do, and less worrying about making technology work. So,
Fantastic. And I think that's really one of the main messages also from our last conversations with many other facilitators, whether we talk about Miro or Mural, it doesn't matter, but simplicity and also thinking about whether the objective of whatever we're doing, the activity requires a different tool outside
mhm,
of our platforms.
mhm, mhm.
Fantastic. So thank you very much, Kassy. As always, 43 or 42 amazing, inspiring minutes with you here. So everybody out there, don't miss to go on kassyconsulting.com. Her new book, probably you'll find it on the webpage. So you find it also on Amazon. It's called Producing Virtual Webinars, Events, and Meetings, correct?
Producing virtual training, meetings, and webinars. It's got a
Okay.
long name. Yeah.
Producing at Kassy, you probably find it. Go to Kassy's blog and don't miss out on the virtual training hero tips there. And connect with Kassy. You also find her in this post. She for sure is also the virtual trainer certificate that she's offering is amazing.
Mhm.
So Kassy, thanks to you again. It was tremendous having you here. After a very exciting week for you, we're sort of closing down here, at least in Europe, because it's 7. At your end, it's early. We're closing down your week, to say so, right?
Yes. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And Barbara, thank you for having me here. And as always, keep doing all the wonderful work that you're doing.
Thank you very much, Kassy, and bye bye.
Bye-bye now.
It was amazing. Thank you very much for your participation, for your comments, for your questions. And don't miss out. Next week, we are going to have here, as I said previously, we're going to talk with Shilpa, connecting from India from the Learning Gym. And we're going to talk about inclusion in the virtual space. I'm not sure if you remember last year, I did several master classes during the summer about inclusion in virtual trainings, inclusion in virtual meetings. And with Shilpa, we are going to go also very deep into that topic. Next Friday, it will be already in the afternoon because, otherwise Shilpa needs to stay up until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So next Friday at 3 p.m., we are connecting here on LinkedIn. And with that, I'm going to let you now float into the weekend, most of you, I hope so. Don't miss out on our webpage, the newsletter, Become a Virtual Space Hero. We're going to send out very soon also an invitation to the next TIAGI conference. We have for Virtual Space Hero members a partner code. It will be an amazing interactive online conference with a lot of virtual tools that you can learn there. Just subscribe to our newsletter and you're going to get the invitation for that conference plus the discount code. With that, I'm leaving you and I'm wishing you all the best for this weekend. Enjoy it, and I hope to see you next Friday. Bye.